So, where did you live in the 1960s, and what kind of community was it?
Lived in Lemoyne, Pennsylvania. And it was a small community. One elementary school. We bordered on New Cumberland, next town down, and Camp Hill. Right. Central Pennsylvania.
Yes, suburban Harrisburg.
See, now there you go. You're exiled to the...
No, it's fine.
Do you want to start over again?
No, it's fine. I don't know.
You can edit.
Yeah, I can edit it. So I have 4 subtopics. So I'm just gonna keep this going, and then I'll just go in, and it'll just take the like time. Like this. So I have under 1960s. I have social reforms, Cold War, Vietnam, and then assassinations and reactions. Is there any you want to start on, or?
Do you want me to sort of repeat what I had said back when? And I think
just whenever you get to, is there one that you want to start on? Or you just
I think I know the most about the assassination.
All right, we'll do assassination first then.
Of JFK.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask the same question for JFK, MLK. How much you know about JFK? How much do you know about MLK?
Not nearly as much.
Okay. And then
and
Robert
RFK. Again, nothing quite so intense as to...
And then, do you know anything about Malcolm X, or should I just not even answer?
No, I do not.
All right.
Anything about
So definitely ask... I don't even need this, so we can just have...
Okay.
Is she talking loud enough?
It's fine, it's fine. You don't need to be...
I don't need to crank up the volume? Because I am told when I stand up in church, and I think I'm talking loud enough.
Sometimes I do it where I talk and I think I'm just like loud, or I'm just normally like, why are you so loud? I was like, I'm sorry.
Oh, so you get the other.
I get the exact
Nobody
opposite.
will misunderstand.
No.
We're not here. Okay, well.
You want to start with assassinations? Is that the one?
Sure.
Okay, where were you when JFK was assassinated?
I was living at 613 Warren Street in Des Moines. A neighbor across the street called on the telephone and asked if I had my radio or TV on. And I said, no, I did not. And she said, well, the president's been shot in Texas. So I thanked her, hung up, and turned on the TV. And already they had switched from their regular programming. And it was really an extraordinary...
So how did you react to it? Like, what was...
Shocked.
Saddened.
Bewildered. So... surprised that something as dreadful like this could happen.
Did the community act in a similar way?
I would think they did. I know that was a Friday. Sunday in church, the sanctuary was filled to overflowing, and it was a very somber service. And while we were in the midst, Lee Harvey Oswald was being assassinated.
So that was during
that Sunday morning. Now it was an hour. Their time difference was an hour off from ours, but we came home, or maybe had the radio on in the car on the way home from church, and this bulletin came. More shocking news. And then I think the country sort of was almost paralyzed for the next 5 days or so, with all the pomp and circumstances of funeral. And for me, one interesting fact, I don't know how long after the actual assassination, I had lived in Birmingham, Michigan for 2 years as a freshman and a sophomore in high school. And one of my classmates turned out to be the young man in the Army who was in charge, pretty much, of all the events and the circumstances that went on with the national funeral. Off the tip of my tongue, I don't have his name anymore.
I'll find out.
But he was in the Army and an officer. And he was the one with Mrs. Kennedy's help, who would have had the boots reversed in the horses' stirrups, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, another unhappy situation, he died maybe about a month later. And at the time it was just attributed to the stress. So this was a Birmingham high school graduate, Birmingham, Michigan, who was part of that whole episode. I hadn't known him in high school well, but I knew him, who he was.
Right. So, is there a lot of experiences with the MLK assassination? Was there a lot you remember about that one?
Well, we now lived where we live now in Richboro. And I think since there was a baby and a toddler in the house at that time, and I guess a fourth grader, there was no way I could be attached to the TV the way it was. But I had watched the I Had a Dream speech done by Martin Luther King on TV. And again, just so taken aback by horrific events like this is happening in the United States.
Anything with RFK, Robert?
That again,
or not as much?
That again, of course, hearing about it immediately, you go to the TV and that's all the coverage there is. And of course for us, as Penn Staters, who should be a bodyguard that probably still has regrets that he wasn't able to protect Robert Kennedy. Rosie Greer was a Penn State football player when I was on campus. So there was a sort of a connection there, having graduated from the same school as Rosie Greer. Amazed to see him part of the crowd.
That's all I have for assassinations.
Okay.
Do you want to do social reforms, Cold War, or Vietnam? It's your free choice. I have more in terms
Did I
of how much I
answer
have.
questions for either of those? Any of those?
I have the most for social reforms, and then Cold War, and then Vietnam War.
Okay. Well, then we'll go with social reforms.
All right.
Next.
Okay. Did you have any experience with the civil rights movement, or how did you feel about it? Just your general experience with it in your daily life? Was there really anything?
Well, I have had no problem ever with people trying to have the same opportunities that people that have been born Caucasian have always had. And I've been blessed, I think, to always have empathy because I think I could be in this person's shoes that's striving for a better life. And I do have wondered in the past if I had been born in other circumstances and lived in a neighborhood where the families weren't as successful financially, educationally. So I've never had a problem. Your mom's giving me a timeout. Or cut it off.
It's fine.
Too much bragging. No. The cuckoo.
I haven't heard
it.
No. I'm like, you're going to talk and you can't hear you.
Well, that's true.
Probably not.
We should have shut that off, I guess.
That's fine.
You want me to say it all over again?
No.
And shorten it?
So,
The cuckoo will be saying, will be reflecting on what I've said. Cuckoo!
better than
Yeah, you're
bloopers.
cuckoo.
We got a little blooper reel. Okay, so you talked about that you did watch the I Have a Dream speech.
I did.
Is there anything more you want to say about it, or just...
Well,
How it affected
again,
you.
it was incredible. And, you know, your heart, my heart, just went out to people who were not living the life that I was able to live. I mean, circumstances were not the same at all. Not the same opportunities. Just not fair, as I would see it.
Okay, then I have for women's rights movement, just talking about whether or not you support it, and then there were a large majority of women who thought that it was, instead of pushing the cause forward, it was taking it back and pushing it back. Like, did you support the cause, or did you think it was doing women wrong?
No, I always thought, again, if you're able and you're capable, why shouldn't you, if you're female, make the same wage, assume the same positions of responsibility? Why not?
Okay. And then, was your daily life affected by the women's rights movement? Like, and if there were any ways your daily life changed after that? Was it... Did you notice any changes? No?
No, but I always, and I don't know this relates to women's rights, but the fact that we have a daughter who's an engineer, which was a male-dominated field, I always was in awe of her ability to deal with the people that she worked with, men in particular, who assumed she would always
That would be
get
less
the
than...
coffee,
Oh.
or she was the secretary, or that she wasn't as bright as they were, or as able.
Did you ever read The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan?
I tried it.
And you didn't get through?
I thought, and I guess this is what it would have taken. I thought she was a little strident. I thought, there's a woman still who's your age, who lovely to look at, which helped. But in the forefront, I think she was the editor of Ms. magazine. Anybody help me out? Gloria Steinem. Much better, obviously because of
Yes.
her appearance. Poor Betty Friedan, whatever. I think it was a
Didn't get as
softer
much
sell
attention.
approach by Gloria Steinem
Yeah.
than by Betty who was in your face. Strident would be a good word for me.
And that's what I have about that is, how did you feel towards Eleanor Roosevelt?
Oh, I thought she was extraordinary.
How did you feel towards her political campaigns? Did you like her?
I did. I having just read she was an extraordinary lady. She was very shy and easily intimidated early on, but she rose above that, and she was a wonderful force for good, and she saw the value in people that were of other color when it was almost unheard of at the time. So yes, she's a heroine.
You want to do, that's all I have for that.
Okay.
Would you like to do Cold War or Vietnam War next? Cold War literally only has like one more question than the other. They're about the same size.
Well, I guess with a Cold War, I would think in terms of your grandfather flying as a navigator on a crew, refueling bombers that were always in the air on the chance that Russia would decide that they were interested in firing a missile. And so, for me, the Cold War meant the United States was constantly trying to be prepared in the event that that would happen.
I'm just going to go with Cold War then. It's around that. How did you cope with the fact that any day could be last was the bombings, and how did this affect your daily life and actions? You can see you were getting a little into that, so I'll just...
Yeah, I think I told you about going to a dermatologist for our older daughter who was having a problem with her hair coming out. And it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it was sort of nerve-wracking. But even then I thought, I don't know if I should be saying this, it's in God's hands what's going to happen here. And you can be concerned, and you can be thankful that there's negotiations going on, and hopefully it will turn out that we don't all, go up in a mushroom cloud. But we were at the dermatologist that day. I think that it resolved itself, and Khrushchev pulled the missiles out of Cuba.
This is wonderful. This is all about personal experiences and getting so much.
Yeah, it was that time frame. And your mother, of course, wasn't on the scene. Not yet. Yeah.
Were you that interested in, did you hear a lot of news about Cold War events like Bay of Pigs or Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yeah, we did. We did. Huge disappointment with the Bay of Pigs.
Did that affect your views towards JFK in the beginning?
Probably not. I think he stayed my hero till the end. However, many years after, as these things happen, personal
Marilyn Monroe.
peccadillos are found out, and it sort of tarnishes.
Yeah.
And reduces your admiration.
Yeah. How did you feel towards communist Russia? I know there are a lot of people who were very avidly, they hated them, and then the people that just did not care as much.
My feeling is always, even going on right now, the Russian people as a whole are very much, it's just that people who have the power make problems, huge problems.
Yeah, there are people who are very
territorial
against just Russian people just in general, just because of.
Oh.
So you're not like that.
No, I just assume, for the most part, they're like we are. They're living a life, trying to make a living, raise a family, eat 3 meals a day for the most part. It's just people that rise to the top, unfortunately, have usually territorial instincts,
Right.
and the common man suffers.
What were your views towards communism?
Well, I thought it was eventually not going to take over the world. I mean, I just didn't see it happening.
Were there your views before Cold War? Were they changed by Cold War, or was it still same old?
You have to feel for people, for instance, in Russia, where they're hungry, they're sacrificing their young men for a cause that you have to wonder is never gonna succeed. So, I can't say that communism, I was a rabid communism hater. I mean, I never got to a point where I was...
Yeah, you weren't one of those people who were super...
No, I wasn't going to argue with anybody that was...
Right. Was there any... Your views on the world, or just anything in general, was any of your views shaped by Cold War? Did you feel different after it?
Well, after the Cold War was a huge sense of relief that, that had calmed down. And I was very, I guess this is the start of the Cold War, the Berlin airlift, United States at the end of the Second World War. Then, it was obviously a mistake that Berlin was divided into 4 sections. And then it became East Germany versus West. And that the United States rose to the occasion to fly in, even though Russia said you best not, to feed people. I think, I don't know how to compare that to today, but at the time I think we were doing as we should for people that were hungry, people that were in really dreadful circumstances.
All right. Vietnam War now. Do you know what the term hawk and dove mean, and how they relate to Vietnam War?
Well, a hawk is somebody who's
Very
interested
avid war.
Yeah,
and then dove does not.
Is a peacemaker, or tries. And usually the doves suffer at the hands of the hawks.
So,
Ridiculed.
which one were you? Did you approve of the Vietnam War? Was there a certain point in the war where your views changed and you started to approve or not approve?
What I remember most, I think, is President Johnson on TV talking about it. I think that's where he said at the very end, he wasn't going to run again, it was all influenced by how badly I think the war was going.
Yeah, the public was beginning to see the
Right.
horrors of the war.
Right.
And technology.
Right. Most of my feelings about the Vietnam War now are, of course, how poorly our vets were treated when they came back. The peaceniks, if you want to call them that, I guess, disparaged these men and women that sacrificed because their commander-in-chief said, we need to go and defeat.
They followed suit.
Yeah, communism in that peninsula.
Right. So after we were already in Vietnam, we're already into the heat of the Vietnam War, did you approve of Nixon's Vietnamization, like he wanted to start taking troops out? Or do you think we should have stayed and finished what we started? Or was it good to take the troops out?
I have to say that if you're going to go in and sacrifice young men and women usually, you best come out having resolved the situation.
Make it worthwhile.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You need to go in with what you intend to accomplish and then do your best to do that. But to sort of wind up with North and South Korea.
Nothing to show for it.
Right. And now, look what's happening in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
And then you heard about how people were protesting, and then Kent State is shooting. Did you approve of the way that people protested, or do you think that it was too violent?
Well, I can say this. Now, it won't refer to Kent State, but
yeah, you know.
I know at Berkeley, they took over. Students did the, I guess, president's office or the chancellor's office. And I thought to myself, oh, somebody should have stopped that initially. Scheduled time for proper discourse. We don't take over offices. We don't lock people in or out.
So you feel they should have gone about protesting a completely different way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I do admire people that, not in that instance, but I do admire people that are willing to stand on corners or march for a cause they really are committed to. And I would think that's mostly Quakers, for me.
And then last question, since Grandpa left the Air Force, it was in between Vietnam and Korea, if he had stayed and stayed into the Army until the war began, do you think your views on the war would have changed at all? Had he not retired early enough?
Well, if he had stayed in, he would have flown
Yes.
missions in Vietnam. So I would have been very...
Would that have made you more of a hawk or more of a dove? Would that have changed your views?
I had a date of separation, which meant after 3 years by congressional law, I would get out of the Air Force. Whereas if you wanted to stay in, you had to sign up for indefinite. So the Air Force had the choice of whether you got out or stayed in. So I didn't want to give up that.
So if Grandpa had stayed in, he would have flown missions.
Would that made you
Over
approve or
Vietnam.
disapprove of Vietnam? Like anything different?
I think probably what would have happened, I don't know how different, but my anxiety level would have gone way up, which is what mothers and dads have now when you have somebody,
Afghanistan.
you know, in an actual war zone. The possibility of the plane going down. So I probably would have wanted it to be over in a hurry. So I don't know if that would have made me a dove more than a hawk. I don't know.
So how did you feel overall about the war? Did you approve of us
Vietnam
going
War?
in there in the first place, or did you not think it was our business? There are a lot of people who thought that this is a civil war and we have no right to be
That's
there,
right.
and then a lot of people who thought that we should settle it. Like,
I think what's usually going on here is it looks like an aggressor that isn't necessarily our ally is going to gobble up some territory of a friend. So we get into these situations and then they don't end very well because, for instance, we didn't make North Vietnam a democracy. We didn't make North Korea and South Korea united country, or Vietnam a united country. I guess Vietnam is now, more or less.
Well, the thing
But there's
is,
still Ho Chi Minh City.
what our going into the war or getting involved was we saved the status quo, yeah.
In Vietnam, because I was
Well-
thinking Korea too. Korea,
Well-
we were doing well, and then the Chinese didn't like that, so they flooded their troops.
Yeah,
And then,
but the thing is, if we didn't have that, then South Korea would have been under communist
yes,
rule.
as would have South Vietnam
And also Japan would
Yes.
have been
threatened.
threatened. Yeah.
So, why anybody would want to be president in this day and age? So difficult.
And one thing I remembered. Have you ever heard of the My Lai massacre? Did you hear about
I
that?
have.
Some reactions of that? I don't know.
You know, if you've never been in the shoes again, it would seem it was uncalled for, unnecessary. I mean, women and children. But how can you,
Someone who's been in
or
war.
how can you know what you would do?
That's the end of the interview. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.